Is there more AI than humans right now in advertising? That's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today on Everyday AI. This is your daily live stream, podcast, and newsletter, helping everyday people like you and me keep up with what's going on in the world of AI. It changes literally every day. That's why we come to you every weekday with this show. Before we talk about that and bring our guest on and talk about just what's going on in the world of advertising, because there's way more AI than you might think. But before we get there, let's talk about what's going on in the world of AI news. So probably one of the bigger pieces that I'd want to start with is talking about Meta's new kind of voice cloning technology. So it's called VoiceBox, and they just recently announced it, and it is going to bring some next level voice cloning in this generative AI space. So Meta is obviously Facebook's parent company, so it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to be using this. There's not a lot of details on that yet, but one of the more interesting pieces, because there's a couple big companies, Google as well, has gotten into this space. But something that I think is very interesting with Meta's new offering is it's going to learn other styles without it being trained on. Without getting too dorky, there's different types of AI. There's different types of, supervised learning, unsupervised learning. So this one's pretty interesting that Meta's new voice box technology is apparently going to be able to learn new things, blend styles without being trained on it. So very interesting thing there. Second big news piece of the day, a Guardian report, very interesting. We talked about this on the show before, but it really dives in depth, just talking about, is AI going to make us dumb? That's literally what they ask. AI is making it so easy for us to both read, summarize long articles, but also to write. So it's a very interesting piece here from the Guardian talking about, are we as humans becoming less intelligent? Are we even losing our own ability to read and write? Very interesting piece there that's going to be in the newsletter. Our third piece, before we bring on our guest for today, is a new GitHub survey showed that 92% of programmers are using AI. So not only does AI obviously help with, to be able to summarize and write and brainstorm, but also it's pretty good for programming to help, not just troubleshoot code that is wrong, for different web developers and coders, but also just to write it from scratch. So you might see that 92% and say, oh, that seems like a lot. I'm actually, as weird as this sounds, I'm wondering about the 8%. I'm wondering about the 8% of those people who aren't using any sort of generative AI to help them code better. Because in terms of an output and return on your time in, using something like ChatGPT or Bard, to be able to spit out code as quickly as these platforms do, it's actually astonishing. So we have a lot more in our daily newsletter, more on these stories, and something else about supply chains that I think you guys will find interesting. So make sure to go to youreverydayai.com, sign up for our free daily newsletter. Our team spends countless hours a week making all this AI news easily digestible for you all. So let's now bring on our guest for today and talk about AI in advertising. So I'm very excited to have our guest today, Pierre-Paul Couronne. He is a digital marketer from learningmarketing.co. Pierre-Paul, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, Jordan. And I'm really excited about this chat. I've been following your
Yeah.
stuff for a little while now, and it's great stuff you're putting out there.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I think the content of what we're putting out is better than my pronunciation of names. So appreciate you on that one. So let's talk real quick. But Pierre-Paul, just kind of explain to people what it is that you do, because you do media buying. You put your own kind of content out there as well, just helping people, with advertising. But just explain a little bit what your day-to-day looks like.
Cool. Sounds good. So I do a lot. I like to keep busy. So mainly I work also at an agency called Impact Media. So you can find them at impactagency.io. It's an agency that basically focuses on brands that are purpose driven. So anything that is like trying to do a positive impact in the world. So in that position, I do a lot of media buying in regards to Facebook. So I do a lot of Facebook campaigns, a lot of research, a lot of strategy, setting up different ads. And I also do some freelancing in regards to SEO and content marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Awesome.
yeah. And like you mentioned with learningmarketing.co, I'm putting together basically a blog, kind of like a central hub where I'm trying to help small businesses kind of get their business online.
Love it. Love it. And as a reminder, if you are joining us on the live stream, please feel free to drop a question for Pierre Paul or myself, or just, about advertising, about AI's role in advertising. So let's actually start there, Pierre Paul. So what role do you think that AI, at least right now, and you can talk about it through your own experience or just you think in the industry, but what role is AI playing right now in advertising?
That's a great question. So I think that there's two ways to look at that. I think that there's the role of supporting advertisers, so supporting digital marketers that are using it for anything from ad copy to putting together video scripts to analyzing data. So like basically the marketer, the human that is putting together the campaign strategies, leveraging AI to facilitate everything. And then there's also, as we kind of touched base on before this chat, the platforms themselves, right? The different advertising platforms, so Google, Facebook, they're also leaning into using a lot of the AI to make our days and make our jobs easier, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's their motive, but it is that's what's happening as well, right?
Yeah, I guess if they make our jobs easier, in theory, they can charge more money, correct?
Right, exactly.
But yeah, that's another thing. So if you aren't in advertising, obviously, Pierre Paul, myself, we have a background in advertising, but maybe Pierre Paul, just kind of talk about how these platforms are now, not just, but actually in their own platforms starting to introduce generative AI features. Talk about what that is starting to look like and even what that means for kind of consumers on the back end.
So something that I've noticed just recently, I think it just happened this week. So when I started doing media buying, the person that was kind of getting me into it had mentioned that these platforms were going to eventually require less and less targeting efforts, because that's a big chunk of the work right now, right? Was basically doing a deep audience research, understanding your customer avatars, find out where they are, how to reach them. That's a big part of what we do in advertising. And so I know that Meta just put out Advantage Plus shopping campaigns, which isn't available to everybody just yet, but I had the chance to see it available in some of the accounts that I'm working with. So I'm excitingly testing it out. And it kind of strips away a lot of that targeting. It's just okay, you have enough conversion data, you have enough historical data for us to know how to get your products sold. So it's a huge change, because a big chunk of understanding how to reach those people is not just being handled by the platform. It's very new. I don't know myself how much I trust it just yet. But it's there, and I'm definitely testing it out, and I'm excited to see what kind of results we get out of it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of still the quote unquote early days of AI being in advertising. Even though I think advertisers were some of the first to start using, tools like ChatGPT in their everyday workflow. But let's kind of fast forward, because that's what I'm most interested in is, as there's more AI capabilities in the actual tools. So, within Facebook and Meta, when they're starting to introduce generative AI within their own platforms, Google has obviously already started to enroll that. And, they had some big announcements around that as well. But kind of one of my questions and how I open the show is do you think that we're getting to a point where there's too much AI in our advertising? What's your take on that?
So there's a lot of people using AI for a lot of things. And so myself, I find it almost silly not to use it if you need it on your day-to-day job. If you're writing copy, if you're doing anything of the sort, it's much easier to start with ChatGPT, for example, to write some ad copy or website copy as a first draft. I think that people really need to be mindful to not just rely on just that. You need to second revision, third revision. You need to personalize it, right? And so in that sense, I do think that we're going to be seeing a lot more content over the next few years that's just purely generated by AI. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. if there's too much AI in general, I think it also allows people to get distracted really quickly. So what happened with the AI boom is that everybody started building new tools, right? So now all of a sudden we have like 10 new softwares being sent at us every other hour. And it's great because some of it helps you streamline and make your job a lot easier. But if you're trying to build a process that is best for your client, you also don't want to get distracted too often. Like I used that example earlier. You don't want to build and rebuild the plane mid-flight. You know what I mean? You got to find what works for you and kind of like stick with it. So there is such a thing, I think, as too much AI, where you get too distracted, basically.
Sure. And maybe there is a sweet spot. So let's talk about it from the consumer perspective. So maybe what this means for consumers is they're going to start seeing ads that they feel are more tailored to their needs, to their pain points, because the advertisers on the front end have access to more tools and technologies and capabilities than ever before. Is that something that you see happening? Maybe consumers just getting better ads on the back end?
That's a very good point. So a big change that's been happening with, like, the post iOS 14, all of that, a lot of the people have become more mindful about their data. And so as that happened, it's a good thing. But as that happened, retargeting capacities have also been changing a lot. So that was one of the ways that advertisers used to be able to get the most relevant ads in front of the consumers, was by retargeting things that they were interested in. As that's being stripped away more and more, there's less of that being involved in the industry right now. I think that leveraging artificial intelligence to just like, the focus needs to be on the ad now. It needs to be on the creative. So yeah, I do think that using AI will allow us to, like you said, create better ads, which more entertaining, more edutainment, right? Like creating entertaining and educational content that really resonates with the right audience. And then they can make the choice to, like, yes, this is for me,
For sure, for sure. I get that, because it's one of those things, and maybe this is more because of my background in advertising and marketing, but I don't mind very tailored, highly targeted ads, because it's like, at least to me, it's like, I'd rather be flooded with ads that are addressing some of my pain points and to see them everywhere than to just seem, ads that aren't relevant. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Cool. And as a reminder, if you are tuning in, if you want to know anything from Pierre Paul, if you want to know anything about AI and advertising, please drop us a comment. This is, I think, really cool to learn, from kind of experts about what's going on in the world of AI. So let's, Pierre Paul, I think something that you said that will resonate with the everyday person, even if they're not in advertising, is just doing different aspects of their role in ChatGPT or Google Bard or, Microsoft Bing. So, you talked that you spend a lot of time in ChatGPT. What's that look like? Just quickly walk us through that process of how you're using ChatGPT for different aspects of your role.
So I think one of the most obvious use cases there was copy, like we were saying, like not to start with a blank page, if you're writing ad copy, if you're writing website copy, whatever it is. But I think people are pretty familiar with that now, and I've been using it quite a bit. One of the things that I've been testing out a lot, which is really fun, is analysis. So kind of just like analyzing the data that is available, right? So one of the clients I was working with had organized an event that we had promoted earlier this year, and there was 10,000 plus people at this event. It was an online event. And so he had sent customer surveys. So we got all that data back, which is a lot of data. And I'm not a data analyst, but as a marketer, I want to leverage that data, right? So I plugged in as much of it as possible into ChatGPT and had it look for commonality. I had it look for, like, okay, what are some of the things that people are liking, not liking? Like, help me reinforce my avatar, basically. So how we, like, in the process of building a marketing strategy, you need to have a good idea of your buyer persona, your avatar. Well, ChatGPT, I think, takes away a lot of the biases. Like, all that data that's being collected, we can analyze it and be like, yes, these are the actual pain points,
Yeah, I think that's such a great and underutilized right now use case for ChatGPT and other AI systems, is being able to take just mountains of data and being able to not just better analyze, but also to talk to it and to produce something better on the back end. So maybe Pierre Paul, for people that, which I think is a lot of companies that are dealing with, surveys, customer data, how would you recommend that they get started in that process of using ChatGPT or another AI tool to make use of that data?
I myself am just starting off with it, right? So it's hard for me to build out a process here on the spot.
Sure.
But I think that what I'm going to say is just start collecting whatever information you do have, because a lot of companies have been doing a lot of data collecting, right? So like, and through Google Analytics or surveys or whatever it is. And so I've noticed a lot of brands don't often use that. They just collect it, right? And then they just expect that somebody in the future will be able to use it for something, right? But in the world of also data processing and data collecting, there's a lot of changes that are happening constantly, as we know, with Universal Analytics, switching to GA4, all this stuff. So I think just taking action, prioritizing the data that you already have, and yeah, just have fun with it. Run it through ChatGPT, run it through any other AI that you trust, and because that's the other thing, right? You want to trust wherever you're putting it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Without getting overly technical, but I think it does, it will impact the everyday person. So in 2024, Google is planning to migrate the majority of, Chrome users off of like third-party cookies. So from an advertiser perspective, and just for the everyday person, what that means is, companies aren't going to be able to, quote unquote, track you as much as normal. So that first party data is extremely important. What's one other way, Pierre Paul, outside of, writing ad copy or, looking at customer data, what's one other way that you've really been able to use, ChatGPT or other AI in your day-to-day workflow?
So this one's a bit unrelated to my, well, some that's unrelated. So I've been using this one tool called Beautiful.ai, and I know there's probably a couple of other ones out there that do the same thing, but presentation. So making like decks of presentations for your clients, for your reporting, for your pitches, for whatever it may be. That used to be one of the things that I, let's say, dislike the most on my day-to-day. It's not that I don't like it, it's just that I'm not super artistic. It's not really like, I understand the importance of art in marketing, but it's not my strong suit. So I love the fact that there's an AI that will allow me to just say like, hey, this is what I want in my presentation. And it just like, boom, makes it like in front of you. And so I think that's really impressive. Yeah, exactly. It has a couple of features in here where you can just literally tell it like, hey, I want a presentation about search engine optimization, and it will build it for you. And then I can combine with like the proper text and whatnot. So it's really, really interesting. Another tool that I've been using in AI is scheduling. So as I mentioned earlier, I do a few things, right? So I have my personal branding with learningmarketing.co. I work with Impact Media. I am also building a course. There's a lot of partnerships and collaborations that are happening. And managing multiple schedules is kind of challenging. There's a few tools out there that lets you do that with AI now. So I think there's, I don't know if it's called Motion, but I use Reclaim. So there's a couple of different options. Yeah, Reclaim, exactly.
Yeah, that's great points. And if you are kind of listening on the podcast, here on the live stream, just kind of showing some of these different websites that Pierre Paul's talking about, both Beautiful.ai and this Reclaim. So that's another thing. I get people asking pretty often, hey Jordan, how can I use AI in my everyday life? And kind of what my recommendation to people is start where you're spending the most time, right? Like Pierre Paul says that he's spending, 4, 5, 6 hours a day inside of ChatGPT because he's integrated his day-to-day workflow within there. But maybe ChatGPT is not for you, but think of where you're spending your most time. Yeah, maybe you're building presentation decks all day, so ChatGPT might not make the most sense for everyone out there. So that's a great point, Pierre Paul, that there's other great AI systems built around some of these workflows.
If I may, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say really quickly, if I may add on to that thought, you could also ask GPT, right? You could be like, here's my job, here's what I do. Like, how can you save me some time? And it'll tell you, right? It's a conversational, it's a chat. That's what's cool about it.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. That's one of, I think even for power users of ChatGPT, one of the things that most people are falling short on is asking questions at the end. That's something, we have a prompting course, and, before you actually give a prompt, you need to prime the chat. And before you get started, you say, what other information do you need from me before I give you this prompt? Yeah, but that's a great point. Pierre Paul is just asking the question. So I will ask one more question as we wrap up this episode of Everyday AI Live. But what is maybe your one piece of advice to people who maybe are not hesitant necessarily, but maybe they just don't know how yet to integrate ChatGPT into their day-to-day lives or other AI systems. So Pierre Paul, what's your recommendation or your tip for the everyday person who hasn't yet started that journey?
I would say start small. Start with something simple. Like if you feel like it can also be overwhelming, right? Like you are messing with like an artificial intelligence. We have a lot of history and sci-fi movies kind of telling us like don't do that. But
Mhm.
I think if you're trying to get into it, I say start small. Just start with some small tasks, and then see if how comfortable you are with it. With like adding new tasks to it. Like that's what happened to me. But now, like I'm 5-6 hours in a day. You know what I mean? Like it quickly took over a lot of my job flow. So, but you want to stay relevant. You have to, right? Like this thing's not going away. You want to stay up to date with it. So I
Yeah,
think that would be my recommendation.
that's such a great tip. Is yeah, start small, and all of a sudden you're gonna find that ChatGPT or something else is a great co-pilot that
Mhm.
can help you from the beginning of your day to the end. So with that, Pierre Paul, thank you so much for joining Everyday AI. It was a pleasure having you on and talking about AI in advertising. So thanks for joining.
It was awesome, Jordan. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Honored to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a reminder, please go to youreverydayai.com. That's youreverydayai.com. So, a lot of the things that Pierre Paul is talking about during this episode, we're going to share about those things and more in our daily newsletter. It's a free newsletter, so make sure to sign up. And if you are listening on the podcast on Apple or Spotify, thank you for doing that. Or you can always join us live every morning, 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, Monday to Friday. So, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you back tomorrow and every day on Everyday AI. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.